Welcome to the Stories Are Soul Food podcast, presented by Cannonball Books and Great Homeschool Conventions.
Okay, what are we talking about today, Brian Cole? Here on Stories Are Soul Food, episode number 57.
We are welcoming...
That's tradition.
Really? Is it 57?
No, it's tradition that we always misnumber
We get the
episodes.
number wrong, but actually this is a big one. It's number 50.
Wow.
Let's just call it episode L.
That's Roman numeral for 50, not a sign for
Thanks, Brian.
loser.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian, for translating. Episode L.
We're here with Christine Cohen, who is, among many things,
Special guest of episode L.
Yes.
Those are the types of helpful edit notes Brian puts in the lines of my manuscripts.
Yeah.
Clarify that this does not mean loser.
Yes.
Or he'll be like, is Venice really in a lagoon? I got that one. Sorry. This won't be Make Fun of Brian podcast.
No, I think you just kind of self-owned yourself on that one.
Is
Venice in a lagoon.
It is actually.
Is it
Yes.
in a lagoon?
Yeah.
I went ahead and
No, it's
swallowed
not.
my pen on that one.
I'm going to say no. It's not a lagoon. I defy
I did the important research
to say
and double checked on
what
it.
Didn't
is
you
a
rewrite that? You said bay. I thought you changed
What
it to
is
bay.
a
No, I did
lagoon?
not. I wrote stet on that note.
When
What
you
is
get
a lagoon, Christine? What is a lagoon?
A lagoon.
What is it?
Well, I don't know. It's like an inlet that's shallow.
Did you find one person on the internet who agreed with you that it was
Not
in a lagoon?
one.
Three.
I checked. I checked with at least 5 witnesses.
Okay, 5 witnesses. Okay.
And
but,
Wikipedia.
But what is a lagoon?
That's what I said. It's an
But what is it?
inlet, a narrow one.
And
It's
what
it's
is
what Venice is.
Okay.
In.
Oh.
Nate.
The
See,
note-
Venice. Okay.
It's the
So
opposite
anyway,
of
we're
the-
here in episode L
Yeah.
to talk about the new book, Sinking Kingdom.
City.
Sinking Kingdom.
Edit.
Sinking
We're here to talk
Kingdom.
about Christine's new book, which I'm holding in my hand.
Sinking Kingdom. We talked about this.
The
It's
Sinking City.
I have
Sinking-
said Sinking Kingdom a couple times already.
Sinking
on
Kingdom.
accident.
And I want this to be perfectly clear. I did that on purpose.
Yeah.
Because I'm bitter and I hold a grudge.
It's okay.
I
Yep.
actually think the title Sinking City is fantastic.
Yeah.
I like Sinking Kingdom. Also, you fans out there, when you read it, can call it either one. I think
Yeah,
as,
you
long
can.
as long as you buy it and like it, I think Christine will be fine with either.
I think that's exactly it. Willing
Yeah.
to sell out on that.
Yeah. I want to. We did. Yeah. I guess we'll
If you
have
buy
to
3
keep-
copies, you can call it Floating
You
Kingdom.
can call it whatever you want, and I'll sign it.
Yeah.
Sinking City.
Yep. Well, those of you who've listened to
It's about a lagoon.
the early episodes know Christine
It has
that
a
way.
lagoon on the cover.
What do we say about Christine besides the fact that she's an author, a craft beer aficionado,
An
a parent?
authoress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A parent. She has an apparently very dumb dog who's endearing,
Yep.
based on your Instagram.
Shows up a lot on Instagram.
Yeah. So you guys share a lot of.
I don't have dumb dogs. I have very smart
You
dogs.
have smart dogs. Yeah.
Yeah. Highly
Right.
intelligent dogs.
We got ours for his beauty, not his brains. But that's
Gotcha.
fine.
All right. What's his name?
Willoughby.
Willoughby.
And yeah, I mean, really, I feel like part of the bonding experience for Joel and I with this dog is just mocking him mercilessly a lot. And any attention is good attention. He loves it. So
There you go.
Gotcha. So
Yeah.
he's the sacrificial goat of the Cohen household.
yes,
And to be clear, also, smart dogs are still morons.
yeah,
So,
that is true.
yeah.
Yeah,
I have my dogs are of an intelligent breed, which is still a toddler,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
they're toddlers. 3
Yesterday,
permanent toddlers.
in the early mornings, we heard the sound of our dog ralphing on the carpet, which is like, the best thing to wake up to. And it was duct tape. He had eaten an entire wad of duct tape and then didn't sit well with him. So he deserves to
You
be
need a
mocked.
more durable breed of dog. If they can't keep down their duct tape, what kind of a
He's
dog
a greater
are they?
Swiss Mountain Dog. I mean, the name alone, you think you're getting something noble, but no.
He wanted only natural things.
He's a lesser tropical island flower. That's what he is.
Okay, well, great. Well, I wanted to ask you both actually about the process of starting the novel.
Okay.
So we start with Christine, right?
Should we just plug this book outright real quick and make sure everyone buys this?
Yes.
Sinking Kingdom /City.
Absolutely.
Sinking City, Sinking Kingdom. Buy all the sinking cities
Please
in the
pre-order
kingdom.
it so
Yep.
Brian lets me write more books.
Canonpress.com.
Also, to clarify, it's sinking in a lagoon.
Yeah.
If you want to
That's what
know
you're
where
looking
it's sinking, it's in a lagoon.
Yeah, this is a fantastic book about awesome Venetian princess
Yeah.
who actually has to learn many things about the secrets hid in the city of Venice. It's set in
And Christine, why do you lie so much about Venice?
Why do I? Because it's historical fantasy, Nate. Because I can get away with whatever I
Is
want.
this what Venice is actually
This
like?
is what, no.
Why have I never visited?
That's why I do the alternate historical, is so I can
Alternate
make it up.
historical fantasy.
Maybe real Venice isn't in a lagoon, but this one is.
Yeah, Christine, why did you decide to jump back in time with this second novel?
So this actually goes back to what you were about how we decide to start novels, because I realized
That was
that
a question I was trying to ignore.
all of my books, well, here we go. I start with place, or I start with the feel. So usually what ends up happening is I will read a book and think I want to write something that makes me feel the way I felt when I read this book. So with The Winter King, it was Till We Have Faces.
Right.
With The Sinking City, I had just read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and I was like, this is awesome. I want to do something like this that gives me the same feel for kids, for YA.
And is also hopefully not 800 pages.
And it's not, it does
long.
not have footnotes. But so then really what happened was I was just trying to shuffle through like cities, places that would give that same feel that I guess London, Britain has in Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. It actually almost was New Orleans. I looked at that for a bit and decided.
Also in a lagoon.
Yeah.
Now that we've
Caught you. I caught you. So you don't know what a lagoon
No,
is.
I do not. But I felt like I think I was actually looking for somewhere, water with close proximity to water, something that was.
You really like the mix between the classes here, because a big part of your heroine's story, Leona's story, is that she thinks she sees herself clearly in her place in Venice and does not.
Yes. And I decided that doing that in New Orleans would be, well, back when I was first starting to write this, I was still thinking about publishing in New York. And I was like, that's not a place I can write much about. Also having not.
Oh, they would have accused you of appropriating Louisianian.
For some reason, Venice is safe, but New Orleans
Italians.
is not. Yeah.
Them's whiteys, even if
Exactly.
them's dark whiteys.
Exactly. So, but then I saw an recent article in a magazine that was talked about that said Venice is sinking, and my first thought was, no, it's not. Something's pulling it under. And then I had to go with Venice. So
this is much like a story I haven't written. This is one of the things that I really liked about this was I thought, yes, and it made me want to write a story about the Leaning Tower of Pisa as leaning on purpose and as on a clock that's actually like set by design on a timer.
yes,
But for
I like
something ominous. But the vibe I got on this, and I have not read the final draft. I read an early draft, which is probably 3 or 4 iterations ago at this point. So I'm excited to read the finished version, but it's such a different mythical tone than Winter King was.
yes,
So it makes sense to me that you went about it the way you did. So Winter King is going after one flavor, which is like, serving ice cream on Christmas outside.
Yeah,
Yep.
so cold.
yes.
Yep.
I get that a lot from
but
readers.
that's the point.
Yeah,
And it's great. And this one is very, very different and has a different kind of peril, different kind of fear.
yeah. I wanted this one to feel so. The Winter King, and I've said this a lot, but the Winter King is supposed to feel like a myth. The Sinking City is supposed to feel like a fairy tale, but not a Disney-fied fairy
Sure.
tale. It's
A real
ones
one
with
where
fangs.
Girls end up with their feet cut off in boxes.
exactly. The ones with real darkness.
So a Germanic fairy tale, but set in Venice.
Yeah. Just
Right.
keep going back to
Yeah.
to that. But yeah, and I think it still has hopefully it still feels like a Christine story, but I knew I didn't want to write
it
the
does.
same thing.
It does feel like one. I can say that.
Yeah, well that's
How
good.
could it? How could it not?
How could it not? Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you really did sell out in the worst sense of the word, which you didn't.
So this is your second. You wrote the first draft before you wrote the first draft of Winter King, right?
No. I wrote the first draft of this while The Winter King was on submission. Back when I had an
Okay.
agent in New York and I
So
was waiting
you
on that.
wrote draft 1 of Winter King, and then you
Mhm.
wrote draft 1 of Sinking City.
Actually, in between those, I wrote a contemporary murder mystery YA that I tossed.
Well, let's ignore that. Let's pretend like that didn't happen.
It was
And
good practice.
So before you wrote draft 2 of Winter King, you wrote draft 1 of Sinking City.
Yeah. Yes.
And what was it called
Yeah.
at the time?
The Sinking Kingdom.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
You just hear the king.
King,
Yeah.
king, king.
Sinking Kingdom.
Winter King, Sinking
Yeah,
Kingdom.
Winter King,
it's a
Sinking
lot to
Kingdom.
say.
It's all one author.
Right.
Yeah.
But no,
Also,
I get
Nate-
it. I understand Brian's objections, but he was let's just move on. So
you almost said Brian was wrong. You decided to save that for later in the episode.
Say that for when we hit the record button again.
Right.
We stop. Say that for between episode L and episode L1 for the BTS.
Roman numerals.
So you wrote Winter King draft one. Draft one of this book happened before any editing of Winter King.
Mm-hmm.
You got all the way to, well, how far in the editorial process did you get through Winter King before you came back to this one?
I did a first full editorial pass through Sinking City, I think before we even started doing edits on the Winter King.
Interesting.
I think. I would have to go back and look. It's now been 3 years. So
how many drafts did it take you to get to the finished version for this?
For this one?
Yeah.
Probably 4 to 5.
Okay, so you got to a second draft while Winter King was short of finished.
So what I did with the Sinking City is I finished it. I sent it off. I have 3 beta readers, 3 or 4 that I trust.
Highly paid.
Nothing. They are paid nothing.
They're paid the enormous privilege of being beta readers.
But actually, we reciprocate because they're authors as well.
You should stop doing that.
Yeah.
You should not do anything for them. This is an enormous privilege.
You're wrong.
Okay, fine. Retracted. Strike that from the record.
Wow, look at that, guys. So I sent it to them. I got feedback, and it was actually some of the most helpful feedback I've ever gotten on a manuscript, because this was the manuscript where I realized that I can write things that I think are super fun because I love the characters that everyone else finds utterly boring. Like characters in rooms having conversations that I was like, this is the best, right? And everyone came back to me with like, this entire plot line has to go. It was so boring. I was skimming those parts. It was also a bloated first draft. It was 100 and something.
I think that's the one I read.
No, by the time I got to you, I had cut the
I read the lean one.
The slightly leaner. It also got cut down after you read it. But
I read the draft in week 2 of Fat Camp.
Exactly. So I am actually quite glad that only a few people read that first draft, because it was just a funny, cold water the face moment where you're like, oh, I can think something is truly great. Because, a lot of times you hear the advice of you should write, like if it's interesting to you. If it's boring to you, it's going to be boring to the reader. If it's interesting to you, it's going to be interesting to the reader. Turns out that is not universally true. And
it might be universally false, actually. Yeah. It turns out that authors as a breed are kind of weird people.
Yeah.
We're not normal, which means that things could interest us for an extended period of time.
Exactly.
That are not interesting.
This was like a whole anarchist revolutionary moment in the book with these assistants to the magicians that, as it turned out, no one cared about except for me. So I was like, isn't it interesting, the inner workings of how the Venetian social structures
I do feel like there was a little bit of that left.
There was still, we had to cut it back.
I think more. I got to read a little bit of it, and I will say, I'm weird enough to have liked that.
I thought
I can understand why it needed to not be in the book, but it was appealing to me.
We didn't cut it all out. I just thought we needed to not get into an entire political theory behind their view of it.
Yes. That makes,
so that's what we did. And
then we were turning into Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
Is this technically middle grade? Pages. No?
I think this one is the most YA of Christine's books.
Two books.
Of her two books. But I still included a solid middle grade book that's perfect for ages 10 to 16. So I'm pushing it.
Wow, that's a broad shotgun blast right there.
I know that because I've heard back from all of those readers in camp.
Okay.
Great.
So you would say this is YA. Mm-hmm. And what would make you say that?
Well, I would say,
because most people listening still will struggle with that distinction.
Yeah, I would say that this book is a book about not just adventure, but also a heavy helping of Leona and a relationship in that book. So as soon as you add that element,
it gets deep into the feels.
Yeah.
The romance.
Yeah. I mean, you can't really talk about Venice and the masks and the plagues versus the magicians, plus the little bit of magic she's got in there without having a very romantic feel to the book.
You can't have Masquerade balls without a romance.
Right. It's one of the ones that really...
I have. Monthly.
So this is one of those, the first things that grabbed me when I was reading, the sample of Christine's book was just how fun it felt to be in the Venice element.
This skew's older because there's more Louvre.
Yep. And I wouldn't, but I also, that's why I do say it feels like a helpful way to handle love, the way a fairy tale does. The fact that the princess gets with the prince, calling it a love story it is on one level, but also in our current YA environment, it's not a love story.
But also,
Yeah.
I was playing with the
It's a fairy tale.
Shakespearean
Yeah.
girl dresses up as a boy trope, which again, like if you're looking at 12th Night, you know what's going to happen at the end.
Sure. If you're looking at the history of fairy tales, you know what's going to happen. If you look at contemporary society, it's a little more,
Yeah.
the ice is thin.
Right.
Right.
So if you go look at the contemporary YA novels,
Cross-dressing is a slightly different trope.
yeah.
exactly. And so the fact that Leona has to disguise herself in order to see what her real problems are and the real problems with her city, that's a very fun theme.
hmm
And, well, you have to read the book.
But I
to
did
find
very
out.
Yeah.
intentionally make sure that it was not oh, look how fun it is to be a boy. I wish I got to be in these clothes all the time. Like there is a fine line of walking there with a current cultural zeitgeist. I didn't want it to become that.
Yeah, it's a counterpoint.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was even in the very first draft I read.
Yeah. She missed her old dresses. Like she missed being a woman.
Yeah. I mean,
She's not tapping into a true part of herself. She's actually
Right.
truly disguised.
hmm
right. And this happened a bit with the Winter King, but the sort of the walls that get put around you in a particular place, the fact that being a human means you think you have certain limitations and you're usually wrong about what those limitations are.
Right.
hmm
People tend to be completely wrong about themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's a big theme.
It is
I
a
think.
truth universally acknowledged.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of another one that's all about love, but if you say that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pride and Prejudice is all about
So
love.
this one
Yeah.
is a classic fairy tale.
Yeah.
A Mediterranean fairy tale.
Yep.
Mhm.
But it is, because it's a classic fairy tale, it's got more YA themes, but it is still middle grade because it's classic. That word classic means it's younger.
Right.
Because it's not dabbling in dark themes or older themes.
Yeah.
So if you start talking about people treat YA middle grade, for those of you listening, like it's a rating system.
Yes.
So sometimes people say YA, they mean like hard PG-13.
Yep.
Mhm.
Like this is just short of R.
Right.
Like it's almost R. And that's what they mean by YA.
Yeah.
Right.
Another-
It's just the level you don't want your parent having
Yeah.
seen you reading it.
And this is not that.
Right. As
Yeah,
opposed to
then-
more complicated relationships, more complicated plot lines.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm never going to be like, well, now that I'm writing adult, I'm not
Oh,
a
yeah.
Christian
I get to
anymore.
be
I can
techie.
write whatever I want. Like,
This can be godless.
yeah.
Now that I'm serving
When
older
I'm-
children food, it can be
It
poison.
can be the awful stuff, which is really most of
Awful
what's
with an
coming out
O.
right now
Yeah. It's
in the YA world.
yeah, it really basically YA to middle grade is not a rating system, even though people talk about it that way.
Yeah.
It's also not just about the age of the protagonist, even though people talk about it
That's
that way.
the other thing is that I
Mhm.
think
She's a little older.
she's a little older than
Yep.
Cora in The Winter King.
Yes.
Leona, I think, is 16.
Mhm.
It opens with her birthday. Or
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Her 16th birthday.
And now
Gala.
the other thing I want to talk about is male readers.
Yeah.
What's the best way to get boys to read this book?
There's demons near the end. No, that was actually how The Winter King, I feel like I had male readers who were like, well, I liked it because there were wolves that ate people. It's like, well, okay.
Once
One
in a paragraph.
time.
Yeah. One paragraph.
So,
Thanks for that, Christine.
so there, I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot because
Well,
I am
that was
curious with this one because we're going much more, it's
I
first
mean,
person point of view.
The wizards are awesome.
Yeah.
The world is awesome.
magicians are
That's,
cool.
that's
place-
the third reason I call it YA. It's because it's first person.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why? How is that a thing?
No YA. First person. It is. You can look it up. I think it's a 70-30 split.
Okay, moving
I
on.
agree. I agree with Brian. I'm taking his
Moving-
side on this one.
Moving on. Luckily, this is not a democracy. There is objective truth.
And the truth is
You
in
don't
the
think that's true?
statistics that Brian just quoted.
Yeah,
I'll
this
send-
is like stop the steal. Stop the steal.
I'm going to post the survey in the show notes.
In the show notes. Yeah. No, but I do think, again, like with The Winter King, we talked about this last time. I think that boys are more than willing to read a book that is about girls, as long as it is universally true to just like human nature in general, as long as it is interesting, as long as it isn't like the thing that I think boys are averse to is just the awful girls literature and like Babysitter's Club or, like, of course they're not going to want to read that. Girls shouldn't be reading it anyway. So I think that
Put
this
that
is one
in the
that could
show
be
notes.
the Babysitter's Club.
Banned.
Banned.
You basically talk about if the protagonist represents something universal.
Yeah.
In human experience. then it should be interesting to male readers as well.
Mhm.
But there's also something to wanting to understand. There's nothing wrong with wanting to understand a female protagonist who is in fact going through something intense and interesting. I think it's far more to do with, you think about Katniss and Hunger Games and why a bunch of boys read that, it had nothing to do with the fact that her situation was universally human and everything to do with the fact that it was not. It was, except for, the killer be killed, the violence, the intensity of it. So the intensity of the peril, the complexity of the world, the interestingness of the world, boys, we can all just admit, are not complicated. So if the character is interesting and the peril is interesting and intense, then boys are interested.
Right. But I guess what I would say is like the truth behind it too. The truth behind that is Katniss is laying down her life to protect her little sister. Like that hook.
For a minute.
Yeah, I know. I've listened to Stories of Soulford. I know where this goes.
For a minute.
But that initial
thanks for listening,
truth,
by the way, Christine.
You're welcome. I wanted to know,
yeah,
what's going on in this
world. Do a little opposition research.
But that's something that that's something that boys can get behind as well. Like,
yes.
Taking my little sister's place.
That's part of the edit that we looked at is obviously the flavor of Venice with ball gowns and masks and a little bit of romance could tend to skew very feminine in its readership. But then you go in and add the aspect that there are court magicians who all have their intrigue going on, and there are monsters that are trying to get the main protagonist, and all of a sudden you've got really fun ingredients for a fairy tale.
Yeah, so if you have the magicians and you've got pretty awesome villainy and this classic fairy tale setup, this is not femmy. This is not girly.
Right.
There's plenty that is feminine. There's plenty that is highly feminine in the culture, in the gowns, in the balls, and the, just in the architecture and the history of the place, in the actual mythical fabric of the place. But you also just have a very interesting character going through something intense. And that can be,
that's your test for whether a book is good, right?
Well, simple enough, good enough for a 12-year-old boy. But there's also something to whether or not the journey of the person is the journey of the protagonist is the kind of thing, and this goes to the heart of what this whole podcast is for, is the kind of thing that affirms and catechizes readers in honoring the honorable and loving the lovely and hating the things they're supposed to hate. And so if it's girls reading about male protagonists, you don't want them sympathizing with and starting to admire guys who are dirtbags.
Right.
And being catechized in wanting the bad boys, nor do you want them being catechized in wanting the effeminate boys. The nice guy who's always there to just support her and never be decisive. But conversely, you also don't want guys to have stories where girls are just wilting and useless, but nor do you want them to be butch.
Just guys with long hair.
Yeah, where it's just, exactly. We're just a guy in a wig and has all these male impulses. So for a boy to read a story about a girl going through a journey of development that involves feminine courage and feminine bravery in a context that is feminine sacrifice and so on, in a context that is interesting and intense, is actually really healthy because it catechizes boys in attraction, in what to admire in women, in what traits to respect and look for. It is in fact soul food. It's the thing you want. It's boys are going to grow up and they're going to admire certain traits.
Yeah.
Or they're going to despise certain traits. And actually fictionalizing a character who has flaws and faults and goes through a significant struggle and an intense one in a weird world and navigates it in a noble way is a great and healthy thing for a guy to read.
Yeah, I was reminded of this because my son has just picked up a bunch of Redwall books, and he just reached Muriel of Redwall, which I think is the fourth one. First one of the few with a girl main character, a girl protagonist. She's a mouse,
a mouse girl,
a mouse girl, and it reminds me a lot. I thought that one was pretty unique when I read it back as a 10-year-old boy, and she handles things differently. She's not the one who puts on the armor and goes and cuts down all the wildcats like Martin the Warrior. She instead has different skills in a different.
Yeah.
goal. So I'm curious to see what he'll think of that one. Because from the cover, she doesn't even have a weapon. I think she has a knotted rope that she occasionally will
That's interesting. Yeah.
beat rats with.
But this is the kind of thing where you don't say to your daughter as you hand her fantasy franchises, I want you to read this because I want you to know what kind of guy to be attracted to. But that has to be an undercurrent in your thinking. You have to be ruling out books that you don't want to be training your 10 and 12-year-old daughters to be attracted to. Like, I don't want you attracted to sparkly vampires.
Right.
So I don't want you to be attracted to like a moth to flame, to men who will destroy you. Like, so we're not reading this. We're not reading this for pleasure. We're not going to imprint these things. But the same goes for boys.
Mm-hmm.
So what kinds of stories, what kind of women what kind of fictional women do they encounter? And are they all impossible caricatures, faux femininity, pornification of women in video games? Because the video game chicks are all just downstream cartoons of porn culture.
Mm-hmm.
They can have all their clothes on, but that's, they're all downstream from that. And if that's where fantasy comes from, if that's where I want a girl who can, climb a rock wall and knock a head off a zombie with a roundhouse kick that way in a tight tank top, like, this is not healthy.
Or you see the George R.R. Martin descriptions of women where you're kind of like, have you met a woman before?
Right. And given his own physical appearance and his own personality, I think probably not. I don't think he ever had.
They're so cold and calculating and removed from everything.
Yeah, he wrote he wrote like an incel, but if we're gonna not too fine a point on it.
Yeah.
So
there you go. The end.
Like, he wrote like somebody who hated them, despised them.
Right.
So basically you take a character here, a female protagonist, and it's the doorway for a boy this is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that's healthy about it is it's exciting, and there is actually a girl who is distinctly feminine.
Yeah.
Going through an actual feminine journey and growing and learning and becoming better and braver and more noble the way she should. And that does imprint, and that imprints in ways that people are designed to imprint.
Mm-hmm.
So you hand books to kids to make them love the lovely and honor the honorable. And that's going to include what kind of girl they're attracted to later. And they might not know why. They probably won't know why. They won't say, hey, there was a book I read when I was 13 and you remind me of that girl. I've always liked that a fictional girl. It's like, no, that would be a problem.
It's interesting to me because I, as I've thought back on now The Winter King and The Sinking City, because my main characters, the girls, are very strong in terms of personality. They're
Mm-hmm.
strong-minded, strong-willed. And that is often, that reveals certain flaws about them, right?
Yep.
But it also very much affects the type of male counterpart that I craft for them.
Yep.
Because then, you've got Peter in The Winter King and Nico in The Sinking City. And they both have to rise to the occasion of what I've given them as the female protagonist. Because, I'm not going to end up, they're not going to end up together if he's just a wallflower. And, it would be the most frustrating of relationships. Yeah.
And actually, there's a lot right now in fiction where people say, man, it's so nice to see the girl take the lead.
Right. And the boy is just a soft, marshmallow or whatever. And
she can...
Main example of that.
She can get the win. There's nothing wrong with the girl getting the win, but the guy as sidekick is
I can't think of a clearer
problem.
Example than that than Luca. If anyone's watched Luca,
I have not
recently.
Is that the mermaid one?
It's the mermaid one.
I thought we were talking about the basketball player, and I was like, I don't know, he's kind of
Oh, Doncic? No, I'm fine with Doncic. He's great.
He's kind of taking the lead a little bit.
No, the movie where the boy is the sidekick to the girl and is in fact a mermaid. So, a merboy?
Is that a Pixar?
No, let's just say maid. He's a mermaid.
He's a mermaid.
Oh, yeah.
He is, yeah. And, there's much else weird going on with that movie.
Right.
But
so to me, it's like, in order for these relationships to be satisfying in my books, the boy has to be strong enough to push back against the main character, when she is in,
He has to be the kind of guy that she would not be miserable
Does that mean
with.
the girl's
Exactly.
does that mean the guy's always right?
No. Have you? I was going to say, have you read The Winter King? But that sounded really catty, considering you edited it.
This is actually an intervention. We've been meaning to bring this up.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Why is the guy not always right?
Why is he not? No, and that's something where they both need to learn, which is very Jane Austen. You get that in Pride and Prejudice. There's usually on
But
both
wasn't Darcy
sides.
just right?
He was right about everything. No, Nate, you're
He was-
wrong.
he
There, I've
was-
done it twice in this episode.
He was neither Pride nor Prejudice. He was perfect.
Yeah,
He
there's
was great.
Pride and Prejudice they're both located in the same character.
Right.
No, but because you need character arcs for everyone, well, not everyone, but the primary and secondary characters, then they both get their moment of realization, their moment of clarity of how
So let's
they've
talk
been
about Taming
seeing
of the
things
Shrew.
wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Can I go ahead and try and make you guys fight?
No.
So one thing that Christine's protagonists seem to struggle with a lot is deceit. And that's a theme that Nate's protagonists, I don't think, do struggle with.
It's because I'm so good at it.
The deceit.
Just lying.
You
Just
can't see
lying.
it.
They don't struggle with deceit.
It's a gift.
It's not one of their flaws. Is that true?
Yeah, it's not something I find terribly interesting. Yeah.
You don't like the deceit one? Because I think Cora and Leona are both two different sides of the
Yes,
deceit.
they are both.
Because Cora is much more a
And
manipulative.
I should say
person.
also, not that I don't find them interesting in your characters, Christine. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
find them interesting. Writing it is not as...
I was
Yeah.
actually just wondering, I wonder if some of that has to do with me being a woman writing female characters, who that is a thing we can use very strongly.
And should.
And
I'll just say should,
should.
weirdly. Should, often.
yeah, I
Read the
mean,
Old
you get
Testament.
Rahab,
What do you-
you-
what do
yeah.
you-
Old Testament.
Okay.
You get
I was going to say, what do you mean?
well, there's plenty. Yeah. So women, that is one of the things we can use well and can use poorly. And,
The Hebrew midwives, Moses'
Yep.
mom, Rahab,
Yep.
Tamar,
Eve.
Ruth.
Mhm.
Ruth.
No.
You were going to
Eve
make us
badly.
fight, but here we are just agreeing about this.
The thing is, even Ruth used deceit.
Yeah, she
to,
did.
Yeah.
to score herself a husband, and she is not blamed for that.
Nope.
You know, it's
Yeah.
like it's really interesting,
Mhm.
but it's
I guess it is if you think of male as a
and
right,
it goes
right
and
hand
obviously
power.
goes
deceit's-
wrong.
Yeah.
Like so, it goes totally wrong. And so, as a kid, deceit what deceit arcs looked like for me was walking out of my bedroom and having my friend say, "Mrs. Wilson, guess what Nate did in his bedroom? He shot his Planet Mobile with a BB gun." And I say, "No, I didn't."
Narrator, he did.
Yeah. And then I'm mad, so I say, "He did." That little snotty narc. He's the one who shot the BB gun. He shot my Planet Mobile.
Mhm.
And then I maintain that for 3 days.
Yeah.
I stick to my guns, literally and figuratively, for 3 days until I'm defeated via forensic evidence.
What, fingerprints?
Because I was not smart, I was taken into a room with the father of my friend, the narc, let it be known. I was taken into the room with my dad and the father of my friend and handed my BB gun. And they said, "How do you cock this?" And I immediately used the trick I had discovered because it was difficult to cock, where you hit the butt of the gun on the inside of your leg and just, just cocked. And they had given it to the other kid and he could not do it.
Oof.
And it was like, and so I remember the moment very, very vividly where my dad stood up and thanked the other kid's father who left the room. And I was like, uh-oh, like what happened? And I'm watching my dad take off his belt with a great big Winchester belt buckle. And I'm like, this is going to be bad. I'm still doing like post-game analysis. Like, how exactly did I just
Own myself.
how did I just lose? So that one,
So
I got,
parenting moment, why did I think that's key. What your parents wanted to make sure that you were not lying, right?
no, they were making sure that I was.
They were.
And I got the belt across the back of the legs, to be clear.
Mhm.
It was really painful. It was it was
So when you
excruciating.
say,
But the point is, as far as the story goes, it was all entirely motivated by anger.
mhm.
Like it was just anger. It was not anything other than that. It was not that interesting. It wasn't like a big, complicated thing. It's a funny little anecdote I can tell on a podcast, but if I tried to weave that in, a guy who uses deception is slimy and becomes more beta, and it's really, really difficult to have sympathy for them. You lose the readers. This is why we have the Jacob and Esau problem. This is why a lot of Bible readers struggle with Jacob. A lot. Like why does God like this guy? He's smooth and a snake. And there's difficulty there because of the sympathy for a man who goes soft and sneaky, somebody who goes soft and sneaky instead of direct and strong and sins in that way, somebody who sins in strong and bold ways. And those are the lessons they have to learn and the ways they have to grow, as opposed to underhanded and backstabbing, which is what a male deceiver is an underhanded backstabber.
Well, and when you even say that, because I just even from that anecdote and thinking about my daughters versus my son, my daughters are much better at deception than my son. Like he, when he tries to pull something over, it's usually, it would be something like that. Like, no, it wasn't me, it was him.
It weren't me.
Whereas the girls I could see crafting so much, it went off on accident. I was doing, there'd be much more, many more layers to uncover.
I should say I too shot a lamp when I was a kid with a water gun and blamed it on my friend. And was defeated.
Well done.
Was defeated.
Wow. This is a universal.
Maybe it's a universal
So
male experience.
I had a daughter. So my daughter in the 2nd grade, and this is my worst parenting fail, as long as we're doing that, who got in trouble. She got a pink slip from her teacher, and the teacher gave her an F on something and said she didn't turn in the paper. And she came home. She's got this little name on the board and didn't turn in her paper, and bad job. And I asked her, like, okay, so what happened? Like, why didn't you do this? And she said, well, maybe the window flew open and the wind came in and swept my paper up and carried it away. And I was like, no. And she said, well, maybe.
I love it.
And it got more intense and more intense and more intense and just fanciful. I mean, like, we're basically on the edge of there being goblins, and it was wildly fantastical and in no way believable. And the worst thing about it, I could not figure out why she was lying to me, and she wouldn't stop lying to me. And it just, like, I'm sitting here, we're going through rounds of discipline and we're talking through everything, and I'm giving up. Just like, I can't figure out the motivation. Like, what possible motivation does she have for this? What is she protecting? What's going on? And so it's just miserable. And I'm trying to figure out how to navigate this. And I know my daughter is lying to me, and she's been lying to me since I picked her up from school until she finally is going to bed late at night. And I still haven't solved this. And I know we're going to try to be working on it again tomorrow. And we go to school, and her teacher says, oh, I found her paper. I was wrong. She turned it in.
Whoa.
And I was just like, oh, gosh, you woman. What is wrong with you?
Could you send me an email next time?
I'm like, what? And then I was so upset, and I'm looking at my daughter like, why were you lying to me? Like, why didn't you just say I turned it in?
Yeah.
She's like, well, I didn't know why my teacher was lying. I didn't, and like the motivation was, I didn't understand. So she was manufacturing with her imagination all sorts of different scenarios in which her teacher might not have been lying. And I was just like, oh gosh, like this is the worst.
So
this is the worst. I just felt sick. I mean, I just felt like but as a man, I could not even begin to understand that psychology. I would have been pointing at my teacher and just saying, she did it. That lying woman would have been like immediately. So anyway, like feminine psychology and deception is a very complicated thing.
And apparently this is why it shows up in my stories and not Nate's.
Yeah. So okay. I don't get it. Let's just say that. I don't get it. I can't understand it. Even my own children do it.
I mean, I think you're right, because Leona has good reasons for using deception. Mm-hmm. Cora as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not
good
and
necessary. And incidentally, lying, it's not that I've never had a character lie. I've never used lying as like a beating heart device.
Yeah.
It's never at the center of a conflict.
Yeah.
On a side note, I actually started writing it in 3rd person.
Oh, interesting.
And I made it.
And at that point, it was still middle grade.
I made it.
We're going to come back to this, Nate, because I'm correct.
I love it. I made it 1 page in, and I hated it. Like, I had done months of research. I'd worked really hard, done months of research. I had done some character analysis. I knew my characters. I knew the way at least the first chapter was going to go. I was like all set. I sat down. I wrote the first page, and it was so awful. And the character, I mean, she sounded just like a puppet that I was walking around a set. And I was sitting there thinking, like, what is wrong with this? I don't understand. And then I just scrapped it, deleted it. And that same night, rewrote it in 1st person. And as soon as I was in her head, the whole thing made sense. And like, I understood her as a character, and the story flowed, and I never looked back. So, except the one time that I think you said to me, do you think this should be in 3rd person? And then I thought briefly.
And then she thought about looking back, and she thought,
I was like, no, it just didn't. For whatever, and that's a weird thing. I don't know. You've always written 3rd person, correct?
Yep.
Except for his adult books.
Adult and short stories.
But to me, that just felt like a very, like, I can't explain why that happened, but I just knew from the get-go, this has to be in 1st person.
That is, I'm impressed with the ability to maintain 1st person for hundreds of pages, because it is exhausting.
Yeah. I wrote it very quickly. It was like a Band-Aid. Just get it out.
That's what happens when you're writing 1st person, but it is it is, there's a lot of fatigue. It is a sprint. So sustaining a story for that long, which is why I end up doing short stories in first person. At some point, I'll have to do a full novel.
Yeah.
Just to prove that I can.
Except for up till now, the YA middle grade distinction for you holds too. First person.
No, I write YA, Brian.
Do you though?
I do. Write YA.
You can get
If
your
you could
editor
see
on.
the
Because they're longer
pointed
books.
glances
The
going on
books
here.
are longer than Christine's. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
and that's the new threshold.
That's what makes it.
And none of
YA.
them are set in lagoons.
Oh my gosh.
Laguines is how we pronounce it.
Yeah. So Sinking City, when is it officially out? Is it out now? Can
Yeah,
people
if-
get it now?
Yeah, if you order actually before November 30th, you get free shipping from Canon Press. It's an awesome looking hardback.
So it's not out now,
No,
No.
it's in the pre-order phase.
but there's a copy across from me that I can leave with.
Yep, there's an advanced reader copy that's going home with Nate.
Are you happy with this cover?
Yes.
Because it is
Oh
a really
my
beautiful cover.
Gosh, yeah, it's so beautiful. Megan and Koviak did the cover art for it and just knocked it out of the park. I am not I struggle with any sort of painting, drawing. I wish I were better at it. I've tried, but I cannot visualize. So when I see someone like take my idea and put a cover on it like that, it's just very
It's
it's
lovely.
amazing.
It's a great cover.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
little
great
ominous.
story. It was a fun story, even when it was barely not bloated.
When it was still in
And
fat camp.
when it was 2 weeks into fat camp, it was a fun story. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to reading the.
And that's quite a process
Finished
because
version.
we had to, we wanted to. That's just what editing is, right?
I'm
Mhm.
gonna hit Brian and just say all my favorite parts are gone, Brian. Where are the anarchists? No, that won't happen. That's not what's gonna happen.
Do you think we did more editing to this one than we did to the Winter King?
I think
We
you
tear it
needed
apart
to.
more?
You needed to. It was
Well,
much
I don't know
bigger.
if I did more before I handed it off to Brian.
Okay.
That's what I'm wondering.
I think so.
You
I think we
it's
did.
so? Yeah.
There were a lot of stretching and squishing and plot
Yeah, you're
tweaks
right.
that happened.
There
Where I
was
said,
that one moment where I brought my giant whiteboard into Canon. Everyone laughing as I walked by to
just like
Brian's
that, just like I
office
just did.
and set it down with all of my I think I had all the scenes written out and I was like, this doesn't work. And we spent a good hour and a half
yeah,
trying to figure out.
trying to figure
what
out,
needed to-
make sure all the timelines worked.
Yeah.
There's some really complicated stuff in this one. And also
Yes.
we wanted to balance the elements. So we wanted the intro section before the story really kicks off needed to be the right length in order for you to get excited and get in it without feeling like we were in a period piece that all of a sudden became a fantasy piece. if that
Suddenly
made
there
sense.
were
Right.
monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there were monsters who could not roll their eyes. Can they move
They
their
just
eyes now?
blink. No, there's no
Good.
moving of the eyes.
Do they even reference eyes?
I don't know. Is that something you remember from the
Yeah.
first draft?
Yeah.
Fishy.
See, the best stuff is missing. I knew it was missing.
I think I
didn't
took
take that
out the immobile eyeballs. Sorry about that.
And that was a big part. With both your novels, we've said the villain has to work in
Yeah.
a particular way. So we ended up really boosting an early one in Winter King and then extending the villain over the whole piece. And then in this one, we wanted to make sure the monsters
Yeah.
did what a fairy tale
I do think
monster-
that's one of my weaker. That's the thing I struggle with more is the villain, making him. Unlike Nate, who can just write the creepiest villains out there.
Nate's like,
I
let's,
might not be able to relate to liars
but you can write some
to creeps.
real
I can really get
gross
into
let's
the
make a
bad
child that is
guys.
possessed by an unbodied scientist.
Hey
We all
now.
have to have our
It's
strengths and
creepier than
weaknesses.
that, Brian. It's much creepier than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is okay. So what's next, Christine? What's in the queue behind Sinking City?
You know, I actually have. See, this is why when Brian asked me, what do we want to talk about on this podcast? And I said, I'm curious, and now it's too late, to talk about how Nate starts a story because I'm back in the starting a story
Okay.
phase. And
Are we out of time?
I don't know what time
I don't
it
have
is.
anywhere to be.
Yeah, we unfortunately we are. We got to
You
be
have to
out
go
of here
teach?
by 2.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
yeah, we lose
10
the
minutes.
studio.
Yeah.
So let's
Well,
we can do that. We
some
can
other
cover
time.
that. We can handle.
Anyway, yeah, so I'm actually back at the drawing board. I do have another book that I wrote for the MFA program that's just sitting around
Yeah.
waiting to be
Yep. That little gem.
worked
So
on.
that's what's
So I've got
next.
that one, but then I am also starting another novel, but it's getting me. I like being in this early stage of. I've described it as gathering balloons. Like I'm getting
Yeah.
all the different pieces together before I take off. But it always makes me curious how other people start. Like for me, I'm realizing I start with mood. I start with the feel that I want. which I guess is tied to setting. Like, how do I want this to feel? And then I work down from there to characters eventually. But I don't usually start with characters until I kind of I know what I can pick from, like which camera angle I could go with. And I was curious how you start those.
It has varied a lot. So I've started with a sentence. I've started with mood and tone for sure. Like the feel of a place that I want to capture, the feel of a particular mythology, the experience of a particular story. There's a ton of those feelings that I just kind of logged on the slate, like things I'd love to get to.
Mm-hmm.
So the feeling of being one of the slaves to kind of march an emperor into a burial with all the terracotta army, like here you are, the household guard taking in the dead guy, then they close you in.
Yeah.
And you're there when you've got like an afternoon's worth of, fat burning on your torch, and like, okay, that's it. So an escape story from that kind of imperial tomb, like those, like really weird perils. I can start with the feel of a peril. I can start with the tone of a sentence. I can start with a character. I could also be the architecture of a myth or, the bones of a story. Like it would be fun to tell an Odysseus story. It'd be fun to tell something else. Like it can vary wildly. But that also, it just gets scratched in lots of different genres, markets, media. So it varies. Different things get used differently. So that I've got a small rural story that I developed that I thought, oh, this would be a really fun novel. I'm going to work on it as a novel. And I thought, no, this is a feature film. I'm going to do this as a feature. Then I thought, no, this is a series. I'm going to do this as a TV series. And I'm going to kind of like lightly serialize it and make it episodic. This is more of an episodic, like just character studies following this character through different episodes. And that's where it is currently, but I don't know if it's going to stay that way. So I end up chasing different threads, lots of different routes. And then sometimes it feels right. If it's the right character and the right tone and the right mythical fabric, it's a middle grade, like this is a middle grade novel. And I think I want to give a year or two of my life to it.
Right. Do you ever take into consideration the market? Like because I know that, again, that's some advice you're told never to do, never to write to the market. But even for me with because the one I wrote for the MFA program is middle grade. And I kind of intentionally did that because I was like, that's a thing that could sell now.
Yeah, I absolutely, I think it would be foolish if you are writing professionally to not account for the market before you give this much time to something. So if you are a builder and you build spec houses and you say, I'm going to build a quadplex, and you're like, where are you going to build that quadplex? In a town that doesn't need them. Like, you should really rethink that. So if you're going to give potentially, if in any kind of publishing deal and editorial and then marketing, up to 2 years of your life to something, you need to get a return on it. So even if you love it, you need to know there's a market for it. People actually want to eat this food you're going to cook. You don't want to spend all this time, making something that nobody cares about and nobody's interested in. If you are a hobbyist, if you are writing for you, if you're writing for your friends, the difference, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There are people who are independently wealthy and they want to tinker with stories. There are people who are stay-at-home moms and they want to tinker. They have no desire to get into the grind, because you are a mom. That's what you are first. And on top of that, the work of writing novels and like getting your whiteboard out and mapping everything and the grind of making a novel good and then releasing it and doing 5 drafts and then getting started on the next one is brutal. It's really hard. And the actual work, the suffering that goes into that is something you either enjoy and you find to be worth it or you don't. So like if you're a hobbyist, then be a hobbyist and write whatever you really enjoy writing and don't even glance at the market. If you're doing this to try to impact the market, then you need to actually kind of cast a glance over there.
Yeah, be smart about it.
And see what people are reading. And if other people just published books exactly like yours, that should matter. And if they bombed, that should matter. So if a Western, 3 Western movies just came out and all of them tanked, I'm not going to go try to sell a Western movie.
Right. Well, and that's different than writing. I don't know. That's not quite the same as writing to trends either. Like, because like if you saw
chasing fads is different.
Yeah, chasing a fad, because that would be like by the time, like you were saying, it takes about 2 years if you're fast to get something out.
Yeah.
And And by then, no one's going to want the vampire books anymore.
Yep. Or Wonder was huge. I'm going to write an anti-bullying middle grade.
Yeah.
It's like, well, by the time you have,
late.
guess what? We're going to be in a pandemic and the supply chain will be broken. And buoyant optimism is going to be the story, the thing that sells. And then people are going to chase that and, it'll be too late and we'll need some more dystopian.
With that wonderful note.
Episode L
is complete.
Comes to an end. We'll get Christine back in about 5 minutes when she finishes her next novel because she is doing laps quickly now. The mile markers are whipping past the window.
And if you have kids who like stories, Sinking City is the thing you need.
Boys or girls,
yes.
They should read it. They should read it. If you have hesitant boys, read it to them out loud.
Free shipping at canonpress.com.
Sit them down, give them a bowl of ice cream, make them listen.
They'll like it.
Yes, and free shipping. Canonpress.com. Brian gets an extra commission.
Not true.
But Christine does.
Yes, I do.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to pre-order Christine Cohen's The Sinking City. Pre-order your copy today at canonpress.com.